Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Balko and here today I'm going to talk about the monk class and go over the first few levels and how you might want to think about building out a monk in your playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3. In fact, I'm actually using a hireling right now to do this video, so there's a few things that might look a little different in terms of my menus, but I'll talk about some things. And you'll notice I'm also on a Githyanki right now, and it's because there's actually two builds you might want to consider when making a monk, and there's a few things that aren't really obvious. And we're actually going to go all the way to level 4 today and talk about, why that is and what are some of these less than obvious choices. So first of all, monks are the classic martial artist in terms of their proficiencies. They get simple weapons and short swords. Additionally, they can use Flurry of Blows as a bonus action to do 2 melee attacks. And then they can also just regularly make 1 melee attack and then use their bonus action to make a second attack. So monks are all about making a whole bunch of attacks in a round. As a result, they do pretty good damage, and they are going to fill the role of a striker typically. They also sometimes have decent dexterity and good wisdom, which makes them decent scouts. They'll have good stealth as well as the ability to spot traps and things like that, because wisdom is a very important attribute for the monk as well. So looking at their base class features, they have Key, which is like an ability point sort of resource system. You can use this right away to use Flurry of Blows at level 1. You also get Unarmored Defense, which lets you use your wisdom in addition to your dexterity. So if you have an array that looks like this, which is a pretty good build, so with your 16 in dex, 16 in wisdom, that means you'll have +3 and +3 from both of those, giving you 16 as a base armor class at level 1, which is not too shabby. You're not going to be incredibly tanky, but it's not bad. Unfortunately, monks are very multi-attribute dependent, meaning they want their wisdom and their dex to keep going. And alternatively, they also want potentially strength instead of dex. Or you could even just be pumping con to get more HP because they don't have huge hit dice. So they kind of have this weird place where they're kind of squishy. They don't have a lot of hit points. They don't have a ton of armor. And they do kind of like medium damage. But one thing that they really do excel at is hitting many times. And this can be good in a lot of situations, because when you have a lot of low health enemies, a monk is zipping around the battlefield, finishing them off. If there's one high health enemy, they can dump all their attacks into that one enemy. If there's enemy casters, they can force them to make a whole bunch of concentration checks by punching them over and over and over. So there's a lot of cool things you can do. And then obviously a lot of the goodies we'll talk about as we go here. So we also have dexterous attacks, which lets us use our dexterity instead of strength for unarmed attacks. But there's a feat later on that we're going to take that might not make dexterity the best build, because all that you're getting for being unarmored typically is getting to use your wisdom bonus instead, in addition to your dexterity modifier. But if you go instead for a strength focused, you could have a very comparable AC with a little bit of strength. And so there is a build where you go something like a Githyanki or a dwarf, and you get into medium armor right at level 1, and you kind of forego a little bit of dexterity and pick up a little bit more strength, and then you take the Tavern Brawler feat at level 4, and that's going to let you double your strength modifier whenever you're making an unarmed attack. And all of a sudden, your monk is doing incredible damage. But it's not necessarily the flavor a lot of people are looking for when they're playing a monk. So for this build, I am mostly going to just play through sort of the typical choices. So this looks pretty good at level 1. You don't have a ton of options in terms of like abilities or anything like that. So we'll just continue from here. At level 2, you're going to get a little bit of hit points. You gain unarmored movement. So this lets you move a little bit further if you are going to go for the traditional monk builds. You do sacrifice this if you are going to go for a strength monk build. You get more key points, and you get patient defense. So this is, you get to use your bonus action and a key point to grant disadvantage on attack rolls against you and advantage on dexterity saving throws. So this gets you kind of to be a little bit of a dodge. This helps you be tanky, but it costs ki, which is a limited resource. Next, you do have Step of the Wind, which means you can turn this on. It doubles your movement speed, and you can jump without having to spend your bonus action, but you did have to spend it, obviously, to get there. This makes monks incredibly mobile. They're able to, this is kind of what I talked about earlier about finishing off targets, so they can fly around the battlefield, and if there's a couple archers, like, you know, kill one up on the cliff and then jump to the opposite cliff and kill the other one. They're so mobile, but it does use up your bonus action, so getting those multiple attacks, you're not going to have as many. You know, at level 5 you'll have 2 attacks still to do that, but it's not going to be your full flurry of blows as if you're using this. And then next, Step of the Wind to disengage. You can use your bonus action, and this once again contributes to that mobility of if you need to go finish off a high priority target or just get away and use the help action to get an ally up in the fight if you need to. There's a little bit more mobility there. So definitely a solid set of abilities, but we don't necessarily get anything to choose at level 2. So we still have all these same abilities. Now at level 3, we're making a choice. So we have a few options here. So we're ignoring that because that's a racial bonus. We have Way of the 4 Elements, we have Way of the Open Hand, and Way of the Shadow. So this is going to give us a lot of options in terms of how we want to play our monk, and level 3 is really when you're coming online, right? So Way of the 4 Elements, this is giving you a few spells. So as an action, you can regain half your ki, rounded down. This is huge. This is going to let your monk stay in the fight. Normally on the tabletop version, this is one of the biggest problems with monks is they run out of ki points constantly, but it's really easy to get a few back and you can keep going. In terms of your spells, you actually have a nice selection of spells here they're actually quite good. So Blade of Rime is sort of like Ice Knife. Chill of the Mountain, this is essentially Ray of Frost. Fangs of the Fire Snake, this is a sort of like a 6 meter like ranged attack, which is pretty cool. It does good single target damage. Fist of Four Thunders, this is Thunder Wave effectively. Fist of Unbroken Air, this is a sort of ranged knockback, high single target damage. Rush of Gale Spirits, this is sort of like a gust of wind that you can knock people back and knock them off balance. It's really powerful in terms of like those Z-axis abusing abilities. It is very fun for that. Create a climbable ice cube, the shaping of the ice, like this is just fun utility you can get as a monk. Really neat. Sphere of Elemental Balance is essentially Chromatic Orb, just the thunder version. It does good damage, a single target at a nice range. It is expensive though, so it's 2 ki points, whereas some of these are 2. So some of these more powerful ones that are more equivalent to like a leveled spell are 2 ki points, and the ones that are like a cantrip are 1 ki point. So, you know, this is like a first level spell, so it's 2 ki points. This is a cantrip, so it's like 1 ki point. This is Burning Hands, little AoE. It's definitely nice. This is Shocking Grasp, but does a little bit more damage than typical. Notably Chill of the Mountain as well. So these are scaled up 1 dice. So instead of D8s, these are D10s. And then Water Whip. It's sort of like a omega version of Thorn Whip. Does quite a bit of damage, pulls people towards you, and has a chance to knock them prone. So a very nice selection of ranged attacks, AoE effects, good single target damage, and a little bit of fun utility in here. So for me personally, I like to mix things up. I like to have a variety. So I would probably go with something like a Thunder Wave potentially, depending on what I need. Maybe a little bit of an AoE freezing area. And then I'd probably also consider taking like a single target, maybe like slightly fewer ki points. So maybe something like the Bangs of the Fire Snake, like a nice single target, like kind of medium range. It does 1d6 plus the 1d10, and then your next attack also deals additional 1d4 fire damage. Like gives me some single target. This gives me like a ranged AoE. This gives me a point blank AoE. Good variety there. And I think I have like some knockback. I have some knockdown, some range. So for me, this is kind of how I would build out the Way of the Four Elements. Way of the Open Hand is specifically using that unarmed combat, using your hands and your control key to heal or inflict grievous hurt. So you actually get the ability to punch twice and knock the target prone, which can set up additional attacks. And note, this is a bonus action, so you can pop this and then subsequent attacks you can then get advantage on because they're prone. Stagger, punch twice and stagger the target, making it unable to take reactions. I think that's all it does. Yep. And then once again, it is a bonus action, so you could pop your bonus action, stagger them, and then move away. So this is kind of another disengage tool. It should be noted though, Step of the Wind would let you disengage guaranteed. This, you're kind of gambling, so it relies on you actually hitting your target. It does do damage, and it's a bonus action, so there is some advantage there in the sense that like you might even just finish a target off. Like that's a good amount of damage. However, if you absolutely need to disengage, you have Step of the Wind already. And then Flurry of Blows, push. This just lets you knock them away. So in terms of like functionality, there is similar things you're doing here, because if you're pushing them away, it's very similar to them just not being able to take those reactions by getting them out of your face. So you could just like knock them off a ledge and then walk away wherever you want, because they're obviously not going to have an opportunity attack against you. But there are other ways enemies might want to use their reaction. So for example, a spellcaster can no longer cast Counterspell or Shield. And there is absolutely enemies in this game later on that are casting Counterspell and being able to use up their reaction so they can't Counterspell your mage who's going up next. That's a really useful thing to do. So yeah, not completely useless. And there are some use cases for staggering your opponent over, just knocking them away. Just wanted to clarify that. And then finally, Way of the Shadow. This is the monk I've actually seen played with the most. I've DM'd for a Way of the Shadow monk for a fairly lengthy campaign. It was really cool. So I'm sort of familiar with this in tabletop, but it was definitely from the other side of the screen. And this is that monk that really wants to be like sneaky in the shadows, really, really useful for being a scout if you want to take on that role of like the scout in your party, and you do have the wisdom to find all the traps, so it makes an excellent choice. So you get shadow arts, so you can just hide from enemies with a bonus action, which is amazing, and then get advantage on your attacks against them. Pass Without Trace gives you a +10 to stealth checks. It's very good. It does cost 2 key points, so this is a thing that you might not have up all the time. It does last a long time though. It is concentration though, so you might lose concentration if you take some damage. Shadow Art's Darkness is like the spell. It's just a nice obscuring area that can, blind everybody in it, can prevent people having line of sight, which means they can't target you with certain spells, and that's always fun. Shadow Art's Dark Vision, it just lets you see in the dark. So if you're a Githyanki and you wanted to go for that medium armor strength build, this could potentially counteract not being able to see in the dark for yourself. It does just last till a long rest. So then there's no concentration or anything, so that's kind of nice. And then Silence, it is concentration. It has a lot of really fun and unique uses. Once again, if you want to do things that are making noise and you don't want people to find you, you want to be that like sort of stealth character, that's awesome. It's also really good at shutting down spellcasters. So this is just having this utility on your sort of like mobile striker character who isn't necessarily your spellcaster. Is really, really flexible, and it is nice to round out your party if you're sort of running a typical like well-rounded party. This could slot in nicely. And yeah, so that's level 3. For me personally, I definitely love like the avatar vibe of Way of the Four Elements, and then just being able to get my key points back so I can just like use lots of abilities all the time is more towards what I would like. So let's just pretend that I'm going to take that right now, and we will go from there. So level 4, you get the ability to, you can use your reaction to gain resistance to falling damage. So getting knocked off cliffs is much less scary, or even just if you want to, yeah, there's some places where you might be taking some fall damage in the game, and just getting down from high places, taking less damage is always great. The big one I wanted to talk about really though is Tavern Brawler. So Tavern Brawler is a half feat. So if you are going to go for the strength build, it could be worth having all the way up to 17 strength at level 1, and then lowering your wisdom and your dexterity a little bit, because you're not necessarily needing them as much, because you do get you like you're going to be getting armor mostly from wearing armor, and additionally getting like a +1 scale mail. That's going to give you that 16 armor right away without any stats. If you still get up to 14 dex, which you would have a few points left over to do, and then have 17 into your strength, and then a few points into wisdom, and a couple points into con, and dumping into in charisma, you'll have probably, like, you might have to sacrifice a little bit of hit points, and your wisdom won't be as high, so your saves aren't going to be as good with some of your abilities. But all of a sudden, you're hitting 18 strength at level 4, and your melee attacks are doing +8 damage. And when you are flurry of blowing, like using your flurry of blows, you're getting that like +8 damage on 3 attacks around. That is devastating. So this could be worth considering as sort of like a fun bonus option, but this is definitely not the typical monk build, and it is not the flavor I know a lot of us are kind of seeking if we're making a monk. But if you do want that like big burly armored just like brawler, this is absolutely fantastic. So I do recommend that. So with that said, let's actually go and talk about multi-class options. So when it comes to multi-classing monk, they aren't the best at multi-classing because they have mainly this unique class resource in key that is going to augment a lot of their abilities. So every level you're taking that isn't a monk level can really slow you down. As a dip, they do potentially provide some interesting options if you want to go with certain flavor for like a druid or cleric, because you can get that unarmored defense right away for being a monk, and it would let you be sort of like a druid or a cleric in like a robe that would still have really good AC, and there's maybe something there, but it's not amazing, and you're probably better off doing something else. One notable standout is definitely Ranger, because Rangers will give you right away off the bat, they share first of all Dex and Wisdom as primary stats, and interestingly, you'll get a fighting style early on, and you can pick up Gloomstalker, which is going to give some really interesting combinations, and it might pair well with the Shadow Monk. Also spells like Hunter's Mark or Hex that target off of whenever you hit your enemy. Those are going to be awesome on a monk because you're hitting your enemy so many times. So when you Hex or Hunter's Mark your foe, and then you're attacking them for multiple attacks, you get to trigger that a whole bunch of times. So there is a little bit of synergy in combo there. But other than that, monks really are looking to be sort of a full class. They're also, I've heard, I haven't tested this out. I've been, doing so many things, but I haven't been able to play around with monk too far. I've heard that monk weapons, quote unquote, are any weapons you're proficient in. So also taking some of the martial classes to get additional weapon proficiencies. Like you could potentially be like a barbarian monk, and then you get to add your wisdom, your constitution, and your dex for your armor class while you're unarmored. And then you could fly into a rage and then have resistance, and that would make you a lot tankier. And you could still use a two-handed weapon and then be doing weird flurry of blow things. So there are potential combos. I'm not 100% of those ones are fully realized, but they do exist. But but I still personally would maybe lean more towards just going pure monk if you want that flavor, and then taking the subclass of monk that sort of better aligns with what you're doing. So that is my overview on the monk. Monk is arguably one of the classes I have the least amount of expertise in. Like I've mentioned before, I DM'd for a monk for a long time, and I'm sort of familiar with what they're doing, but generally it is that mobile character. They are very fun. You get so many attacks. If you love rolling dice, it is absolutely fantastic. If you like making all those attacks, just by the nature of them making so many attacks, I also think that you might want to consider which race you want to be for your monks. So something like a half orc that's going to benefit from critting lots. That could be really cool because you get so many chances to crit because you have so many dice. Yeah, I think though that's pretty much it. So thanks again for watching. Sorry if I was once again getting distracted by all the things I want to tell you about monks. They are very cool. If you enjoyed the video, definitely appreciate a thumbs up or any questions below, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.